remuneration, that they are in a better place. And here too, ministers will discuss our proposals on this already next week. Finally, for the mid and long term, we're looking forward to the first recommendations of our strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture in the European Union. These recommendations will then feed into the work of the next Commission. In short, Europe is doing its part. Now, member states must do their part as well. And this means making full use of the new flexibilities, not imposing more administrative burden, and swiftly adopting the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, President. We'll open the floor to questions. We'll start with Jorge.
Yes. Hello, Jorge Liboreiro, Euronews. I know the Middle East was discussed yesterday, but I need to ask about this because Spain, Ireland, Slovenia and Malta, they just published a joint statement saying that they're ready to recognize the state of Palestine when it can make a positive contribution and the circumstances are right. What do you think of this joint call? Do you think it's appropriate for member states to recognize the state of Palestine on a unilateral basis, or do you think instead the European Union should do that in a coordinated and collective manner? Thank you so much.
Yeah, the debate on the recognition of Palestine was not on the table yesterday, and we have focused on many topics, and you have seen the conclusion of this on this question, and this is the decision that needs to be made by the member states to recognize or not the state of Palestine, and some of our member states, they already have recognized the state of Palestine. But I will share with you what I think about it. I think that if the idea is to start a kind of a process so that this is possible to take into account steps that would be made on both sides, by the Palestinian Authority, for instance, and by Israel, for instance, then it could be a useful process. This is not the topic we discussed yesterday evening, but we discussed in depth the two-state solution, and the purpose is to have two peoples living side by side in security with mutual recognition. This is the purpose, and that's why we coordinate with all our member states, and I'm certain that in the weeks to come, in the months to come, it will be a debate for a big part of the international community, not only for the EU, but I have the impression that it is good if there is this idea that there is a process so that it can be seen as a leverage to make steps and to support the efforts for the resumption of the peace talks.
Irene?
Thank you, Katerina. Is European Union ready and prepared for war following the statements that Peskov made a while ago? Thank you.
I'm very clear. I feel that this statement made today by Mr. Peskov is a very cynical one, one more time, because for 2 years they've repeated again and again it was not a war against Ukraine, it was a special military operation. And they have even decided to criminalize those in Russia when they were put into question, the fact that it would be a war. First point, once again, a cynical statement made, but now they recognize that this is a full-scale invasion. In other terms, this is a war. A war of aggression launched by Russia against Ukraine, first point, and it's only showing that we are right to work to improve, to strengthen our defense readiness. I want to be clear. On the one hand, we don't want to spread anxiety in European societies. This is very clear. On the other hand, we must be lucid and we must tell to our public opinion, to our citizens all across the EU, if we want peace, and we want peace, if we want security and stability, it's extremely important to improve our defense capacities, our defense capabilities, and to build a true European Union in defense. And that's why yesterday evening, and I repeat once again, we made a huge step, because I think this is a new paradigm shift. And I repeat once again that in the last decades we have been working very hard at the EU level with our member states to build a very strong economic basis, to improve the social cohesion of our societies, underpinned by our strong democratic values, and we understand more than ever that it is needed to add a second fundamental pillar, a second foundation for this European project, which is the European defence readiness, and this is what we are working on.
Perhaps very briefly on that one. Russia is at war with Ukraine since the 22nd of February in 2022. And this comment today only proves that the Kremlin betrayed the Russian population in the last 2 years by hiding the facts and denying that they are at war.
Oliver, then we go to the colleague in the middle.
Hi, thank you, Oliver Grimm with the Austrian newspaper Die Presse. One could argue Russia is at war with Ukraine since the Maidan 10 years ago, but that's another topic. A question on SATA. You both spoke about the importance of competitiveness and, the economic well-being and soundness of Europe, to underpin the also the geopolitical interests that Europe has. SATA seems to fail 6.5 years after it was sort of temporarily or provisionally, applied. What does that say about the trustworthiness of the European Union as a trading partner if we can't even get a trade deal with the most European nation outside of Europe? And secondly, on the nature restoration law, it also seems to fail. In Council, Madam President, this was one of the key pillars of the Green Deal. What do you have to say about that this is actually failing, the nature restoration law that was already watered down and now doesn't even seem to be palatable for Council? Thank you.
So SATA is provisionally in place, and the figures speak for its huge success. If you look at the increase of trade between Canada and us, this is the living proof for it. Now we have to take note of the result in France, and we will see how France will deal with it. But it's worth to look at the success that SATA had already by being provisional in place over the last years. How the Parliament and the Council decide on different files, it's up to them, of course. Important is, and we had a discussion today in the Euro Summit on the topic of the European Green Deal, that is worth reporting, because we saw that we have success figures of the European Union compared to US and China. For example, life expectancy or the reduction of inequality in a society, the mobility within the society, the reduction of CO2 emission. All these figures, we are ahead and better than the US and China. But what we also see is that productivity growth, we're lacking behind. And it was interesting to listen to Christine Lagarde, who was explicit on some of the core reasons for it. And it was, for example, that access to capital should be better. Or, for example, that technologies, innovative technologies, should more deep and fluid in our market and be picked up by the companies. But we discussed then, is the criticism that you sometimes hear, it is the European Green Deal, is there a cause in it? And the clear answer was no. If you look at the purpose of the European Green Deal, and this is what the whole framework does, is to decarbonize the economy. And what is hindering our economy or business sector are, for example, high energy prices. Certainly not from renewables. Renewables reduce the energy prices, so they are part of the solution. But it is the fossil fuels that drive the energy prices up. The second topic is lack of digitalization. Has nothing to do with the decarbonization, but is a big, big helping element if we are better digitized. Yes, we can reduce bureaucracy, but one of the main core missing factors is, for example, in our economy, skills and skilled labor that companies are looking for. So what you see is that, yes, we have an issue with competitiveness, and you can define what it is, but we should not take the European Green Deal as a scapegoat. On the contrary, It is the step forward to modernize our economy. And in this whole framework is also the nature restoration law. One part, I think we agreed on 35, if not more, legal proposals in the European Green Deal that put a framework of modernization out there, which we have to fill with life, and we have to address the core issues that lie outside the European Green Deal.
The colleague in the middle.
Thank you for the floor. Sofia Nazarenko, Channel 24. Lately, we've seen that Russia is shelling Ukraine more and more violently. Last week, some civilians died in Odessa, and today Russian drones and missiles hit the Dnipro hydroelectric power plant station, actually a critical infrastructure facility in Ukraine. What is your response to the escalation, and what is your message to those European leaders who are still fearing the escalation? Thank you.
Notre message, c'est l'unité et c'est la fermeté. Et une fois encore, hier soir, nous avons pris probablement la Russie par surprise en agissant très vite pour affirmer notre détermination à augmenter la mobilisation de moyens, y compris militaires, pour soutenir l'Ukraine. C'est par exemple la décision d'utiliser les revenus des avoirs gelés russes afin de les orienter vers des financements de capacités militaires pour l'Ukraine. Et cette détermination, elle est forte, elle est sans faille. Nous ne sommes pas intimidés par la Russie et nous sommes absolument engagés aux côtés de l'Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, we stand very clearly by Ukraine, and you mention a topic of energy, the attack on the energy infrastructure. We have seen these attacks on energy infrastructure in Ukraine by Russia before. Russia tried everything to destroy the energy supply within Ukraine, but Russia failed. We have proven over the last 2 years, and mainly over the last winters, that it was possible to withstand the Russian attacks. Today, Ukraine is part of our energy grid. Today, Ukraine is part of our supply with energy. Ukraine is part of our gas platform, gas purchasing platform. So despite the attacks of Russia, we have not only been able together to maintain the energy supply in Ukraine, but also to modernize it and to shift it towards the European Union.
We'll take 2 more questions and then we wrap it up. We'll start here.
Thank you so much, Zoltan Bugnar, Here TV. EU is to reintroduce tariffs on Russian and Belarusian grain, because it is destabilizing the EU. But why isn't it the case with the Ukrainian grain? So that's a bigger chunk, taking up the bigger chunk in the EU market. Why isn't this in place?
We are very clear on that. We do not want Russia to have any kind of revenues from the EU agri-food market, for example, the grain market. So putting tariffs on Belarusian and Russian grain is taking away their competitiveness. Secondly, we do not want Russian grain to influence our grain market and the agriculture in the European Union at all. And thirdly, this move makes clear that we do not want Russian grain or Belarusian grain on the EU market, but transit is still possible, and of course the seamless supply of grain to the global south or other regions of the world is also guaranteed. So it's a smart move to make sure that we reach our goals, not to give Russia any revenues from the European Union and not to intervene in our grain market.
We'll take the last question. It's the colleague in blue shirt. Yes.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Mindaugas Laukagalis from Lithuania National Radio and Television. A question for both presidents. Are the leaders and the Commission are worried about the countermeasures by Russia in response to the decision to freeze and give to Ukraine Russian assets? And also, could there be any consequences for the European Union companies which are still operating in Russian market? Thank you so much.
In one word, we are not intimidated by Russia, and that's why we are making decisions to support Ukraine and to counter Russia and to sanction Russia. And we think this is fair, that the revenues of those frozen states will be used for Ukraine, for the Ukraine, because they are victims of this war of aggression launched by Russia.
Yeah. We did the move because we are convinced that it's the right way to go. Russia has to pay for what it is doing in Ukraine, and it's fully aligned with the development of our G7 partners, and this is why we took this move. Excuse me? Whatever Russia is doing, Russia does. I mean, this should not influence our decision. We take our decisions.
Thank you very much for attending the press conference. Have a good weekend.